Hi guys, Alice and Kittens, and welcome to the I Need a Magic Show. So this video is the first in a series of videos where I will walk you through all of the most important parts related to the I Need a backend dashboard. And this is the advanced series intended to bring you up to speed to how you can actually create software using Magic Cloud. First things first, what is Magic Cloud? Magic Cloud is a low-code, no-code software development orchestration automation tool. That is a mouthful, but basically what that means, it means that it makes it easier to create back-end server-side software. And very often it is being used as an API gateway between, for instance, your database and the front-end code, or OpenAI and some front-end AI chatbot, or some sort of gateway in between another system and your front-end code. And that is its purpose. Now, it contains a lot of components. We call one page like this, we refer to it as a component. And regardless of what component you're currently inside of, you can click the question mark here to get context-sensitive help. And you can click the Read More button to be brought on to the documentation for that particular component. So if I am on a different page, let's say I'm on SQL Studio here, and I click this guy, I will get context-sensitive help, and clicking the Read More button will bring me to the documentation of this particular component. In addition, you can click the AI chatbot here to get AI-based support, asking it such as, for instance, what Hyperlambda slot do I need to use to verify user belonging to a specific role? For instance, now if I phrase this question, I ask this to the chatbot, hopefully it's going to provide me with an intelligent answer. And as you can see here, it even provides me with some example code. So that is the help system. In addition, it's a multi-tenant system allowing you to choose between all your backend cloudlets by clicking this guy. And if you have some sort of front end installed, this one has AI expert system in particular, then you can click this button here, front end, to come to whatever front end you happen to have installed in your particular cloudlet. Because Magic Cloud is also a web server allowing you to serve static HTML pages in addition to HTML pages with Hyperlambda backend code. So when you log into Magic, this is the dashboard. Here you have a video tutorial series lasting for 2 to 3 hours, showing you everything related to, mostly I need to emphasize, AI chatbots. Why AI chatbots? Because that happens to be the product most people want when they are purchasing a cloudlet from iNiro. So this is like 98% of every single client we've ever had is interested in AI solutions. And Magic happens to be extremely good for creating AI solutions, such as AI chatbots or AI expert systems, etc. So this is your dashboard. You can dismiss this guy, but I recommend that you watch it actually. And these are some basic KPI charts. Here you can see last actions and log items and stuff like that. So now let's rapidly go over what you have of different types of components. Here you have in the create menu, the first component you have here is SQL Studio. It allows you to choose between multiple different databases, whatever databases you have connected your Magic Cloudlet to. And as you can see here, we're looking at the schema for the Magic database. You can also look at the schema for different databases. Whatever databases you happen to have in your particular Magic Cloudlet installation will be visible here. This is SQLite, but you can connect to different databases using the database icon here, clicking external and adding a connection string to MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, giving it a name and adding a database connection string here. When you add a database connection string, it is extremely important that you exchange it. Let's say database is my_CRM like this, then you need to change it with database and these types of parentheses around. Why? Because Magic needs the ability to read metadata, so it will dynamically substitute your connection string where it can find these parts according to what database it wants to open during your particular connection towards that database. So this is SQL Studio, and you can even click to SQL View, select all from, which point now, I'm selecting all from my users database table, and as you can see here, the password is blowfish hashed with individual per record based salts, so Magic is a highly secure system, and I can choose from roles, etc., etc. And I also have autocomplete and all that beautiful stuff. And the way to trigger autocomplete in Magic is to hold down Function and Control and click space, or if you're on a Windows machine, click Control space or Alt space. I can't even remember, to be honest with you, but it's one of them. So this allows you to select records, and you have short keys here, shortcut keys. You can import SQL files. You can also store snippets for later. Here you can see if I now switch to my Chinook database here, you will see this is like a snippet that comes packaged together with the Chinook database as an example SQL statement you can play around with. And you can also save your own snippets. And you can also use machine learning here, create SQLite insert, create 5 SQLite insert statements for a table with name, email, and phone. Populate with random data. To which point ChatGPT now is going to come back with SQL statements, allowing me to insert some example data into my database, as you can see here. So that is SQL Studio. Then you have the endpoint generator. Notice there's absolutely no way I can dive into each of these individually. This is just the beginning of the series. I will be diving deeper into each individual component in future videos. But the endpoint generator basically allows me to choose any database I have currently connected to and actually automatically CRUDify, generate CRUD API endpoints, secure endpoints. You can add authorization requirements here as you see fit, and then just simply click a button, which point, boom, I've got HTTP Web API endpoints wrapping every single table in this particular database. Now, the big difference here is, let me choose overwrite, the big difference here between something like this and Postgres or GraphQL is that this thing actually generates code for me, which means that I can go over, as you can see here, 2,906 lines of code was automatically generated, which means that I can use the integrated IDE, Hyper IDE, to actually go over the code it generates and actually change it according to my particular requirements. Here you can see the Hyperlambda code that the system produced. I'm going to go over Hyperlambda in details in future videos, but this is basically code that can be modified as I see fit, allowing me to easily add business logic to my CRUD API, which is a really, really big thing. Now, if we go back to the endpoint generator, it also allows me to use SQL as my primary language for creating HTTP endpoints. If I now do select all from album where a dot title like at filter, and then I now add an argument. I call it filter string. I save it. I want to have it as a get method. I want to call it custom SQL. I want admin and root roles to be able to access it. Now, if I click generate endpoint and I now go to my endpoints here in the manage and I find custom SQL and I execute this guy and I pass in, for instance, %, then what this one is going to do, it is going to retrieve every single artist album starting out with the character A. As you can see here, it works perfectly. So you can, in addition to generating CRUD API endpoints, you can also use the endpoint generator to create SQL-based HTTP Web API endpoints, which is probably kind of cool. when it comes to generating reports and stuff like that. So if this is like an alternative to Postgres or OData, then this is kind of like an alternative to GraphQL, you might say. So that is the endpoint generator. Hyper IDE we've already looked a little bit at, but it's basically an IDE. And when you get a cloudlet, realize you get your own file system. You get your own SQLite databases. In fact, as many as you wish. And you can actually look at the physical files here if you want to, and you can even download them. If I, for instance, download now, click Igor DB, then it is going to offer me to download the DB file, which is just a plain SQLite database file, actually. And you should be very careful with anything that's red here for the record, because those are system files, and some of them are automatically overwritten every single time we upgrade your system. So if you want to store your own custom code, you need to make sure you do it inside of a black folder such as this. Here you can see the default exception handler, for instance. Here you can see all the modules I happen to have in this particular installation, etc., etc. And it is an IDE. I would never ever exchange this with like VS Code, especially not for stuff such as HTML or JavaScript or Python, even though it kind of works. But the IDE is specifically created for Hyperlambda. And for Hyperlambda, it is simply superior. It's the only functioning IDE, really, you could argue, that you can use currently for Hyperlambda code. So that is the IDE. And then you have the chatbot wizard. It's fairly self-explanatory, but if I punch iniro.io and I scrape 5 pages here now, it basically creates a chatbot for me by scraping iniro.io. Right, and here you can see it's scraping 5 pages, the buy, AI search, contact us, and AI chatbot. So I'm not going to wait for this process to be done because it's going to take a minute or two. So I'm just going to move on from the chatbot wizard to the manage menu. Manage users and roles here allows you to create as many users as you wish. We've already seen the Magic database has a users table. That is where users are stored. And you can create as many roles you want to, and the system is in its entirety RBAC based, meaning role-based access control, allowing you to assign one user to multiple roles for them to protect your HTTP Web API endpoints, demanding that whomever invokes this particular API endpoint needs to belong to one or more of these particular roles, etc., etc. Standard RBAC access control management. Databases we've already gone through. Here you can create a new SQLite database, foo. I just created foo now. Then I can go and click this guy and edit it inside of Visual Studio, at which point I'm brought into Visual Studio, at which point I can create new fields, I can create new relationships, I can create new tables. Now I've created contacts here, and let's create a field called name and give it a type of text, at which point I have a single column table called contacts inside of my database called foo. Then in addition, you have the endpoints. The endpoints is kind of like Magic's internal version of Swagger, allowing you to invoke HTTP Web API endpoints you have somehow created and parameterize these as you see fit. Here you can filter and you can show system endpoints, and you can drill down inside of specific modules, etc. Then Task Manager. Task Manager allows you to create and persist Hyperlambda tasks. If I click add here now, then here you can see default, let me just name it foo, and does the foo stuff. We did the foo stuff, right? Now if I save this guy, I now have a new task. I can execute it by will as many times as I wish. Now I've executed it 3 times, at which point if I go to my log now, you will see we did the foo stuff here. Or I can go to the task and I can actually declare it to be scheduled according to some sort of like repetition value. Either I can choose to schedule it to being executed tomorrow, 9:29 a.m., or I can choose a repetition of every 10, for instance, seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or I can choose a custom repetition. A custom repetition is typically stuff such as Sunday, .01, .01, .01, which point the task will be scheduled 1 second and 1 minute past 1 a.m. UTC time on Sunday. And I can pipe this like this. You add the pipe like this. And what it basically means, it means that this task is to execute every Sunday and Monday and Tuesday at this particular point in time. There are different repetition values here too, but you can find them if you click the help icon up here in the top right corner here, at which point you're brought on to the documentation for the task manager, which documents all of these different permutations. So that is the task manager. You can delete tasks too for the record. Then you have the Hyperlambda playground. This is the version of RPL of Lisp. And it actually allows you to execute Hyperlambda in immediate mode. Right now, if I, for instance, load a snippet here, you can save snippets and have them in your Cloudlet. If I now, for instance, execute this snippet, you see what it basically does. It loads every single file recursively, it transforms every single file to Hyperlambda, and it then counts look line of code. 25,975 lines of Hyperlambda code in total inside this particular Magic Cloud Cloudlet instance. Then you have plugins. Plugins allows you to dynamically install Hyperlambda modules inside of your Magic Cloudlet on demand. If I now, for instance, install HubSpot, I now go back to create HyperID expand modules. You will see now that I actually have a new module called HubSpot. This one just have some couple of HTTP Web API endpoints. But other modules might install workflow actions, they might install tasks, they might create databases for you, they might install a front end, HTML website, etc., etc. And in fact, if you look at the plugins here, filter on AI-expert, you will see that even the AI expert system, which I clicked on here to access here, is actually also a plugin that basically just replaces the content of my etc/www folder with static HTML files. Then you have machine learning. This is the big place where you want to play with your machine learning types. And this one is arguably much better described in the YouTube series you can find on your dashboard here, which I click dismiss on, so you won't be able to see it now. But basically, it allows you to create new models. Each model can have many training data or training snippets. Now, a snippet can be either a static piece of text, such as this one, for instance, if I remove the preview part, or it can be a function invocation, such as this one, for instance. I think this is a function invocation. Then that's it for the manage part. And now comes the MISC, at which point you have the configuration. I cannot show you the configuration, but it has a couple of helper wizard buttons for SMTP, OpenAI, etc. But it basically allows you to modify your app settings.json file. Magic is built on .NET Core 8. So the configuration is actually just an app settings files if you're used to C#. And this allows you to create as many configuration settings as you wish. So it's an extendable type of configuration, but you need to obviously write JSON to be able to actually do that. I cannot show you my configuration because it contains API keys and stuff like that. And then you have the log. This is where everything that goes wrong, hopefully not too much, is being logged. And you can also log info, and you can log, let's see if we can find some errors here. You can search for them, I think. And we couldn't actually find any errors, so there were no errors. And then that's it for the misconfiguration. Then you have the theme profile, just allows you to change your theme, change to neomorphism. And then you have generate token. I cannot click that one either, because if I click it, what's going to happen is that a modal dialog is going to pop up and show me a JWT token, allowing me to invoke the backend. So I cannot show you that guy either. So as I told you in the beginning of this video, this is the first video in an introductory series about Magic Cloud and Hyperlambda. We're going to be diving into Hyperlambda in future videos, but this is the beginning of being able to understand what Magic actually is. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.